Hello, everyone. Today, I'm going to go over my updated Classic WoW Priest Leveling Guide V2. There's a lot in this guide, so feel free to click through the timestamps to watch the parts that are specific to what you want to see. I go over a lot of different builds here, but it's a long video. I'm going to try to keep it as short as I possibly can, though, so I'm going to hop straight into it. All right, priest class overview. In terms of leveling, obviously you can see that I have like three dots there plus a little green dot at the end. Like, what's that bonus dot mean? What that means is that I would say previously, or maybe stereotypically, priests were thought of as kind of like B tier levelers. They weren't like the best. They were very consistent, very safe, always max mana, max health, blah blah blah. Really like safe, consistent mob, just killing machines, just constant churn of one mob at a time. But they were never like that good. They couldn't AOE like a mage. They couldn't get like the speed increase running around the map, one shotting things like a hunter, right? Like they had downsides that was like, okay, yeah, like you're consistently killing mobs, you're not really at risk of dying, you're pretty safe, but you're not that fast. Now, I will say in a hardcore environment, if you want to level a healer in hardcore, you want some kind of something that's going to be good for you in hardcore. Priest, great for hardcore, especially while leveling. Really safe as long as you're not like trolling and doing something you probably shouldn't be. As long as you're just grinding mobs that are equal level kind of thing, you're never going to have a problem. You're never going to feel unsafe. You're going to be just constantly churning mobs. You're never going to drink. You're never going to eat. It's great. However, what the green dot means now in the modern era, Anniversary Realms, we've all realized and figured out how to consistently do the ZF solo on a priest. You can now hit crazy XP levels from 40 to 54, 125, 130K. That's one of the longest parts of your entire leveling journey when you're actually leveling like the vanilla way. But now that we can ZF solo on a priest consistently, it dramatically improves our leveling speed. And for context, like when I was leveling my most recent priest Soraka on Anniversary Realms, I think I dinged 54 or 55 with like 3.5 days played. And that was with hours and hours of me figuring out the ZF solo grind pull and making videos on it and everything, right? So um, it is crazy, crazy XP per hour if you're doing that. And that is mentioned in this guide as part of builds. I'm going to go over the builds you're going to need for that. So if you're not on hardcore, I highly recommend you do that. It's crazy leveling and it dramatically improves your leveling speed as a priest. Leveling speed as a priest. Now for priest at endgame, you probably are playing a priest to heal. If you already know priest, pretty much every version of WoW, they've always been one of the best healers in the game. No different in Classic WoW. They're the best healers in Classic WoW in both a raid and PvP setting. Now I know some people are going to say, "Oh, but what about shamans? They have chain heal, it's smart healing, and blah blah blah." Sure, but in terms of the two stats you really care about when you're measuring healers, obviously shamans bring Wind Fury Totem. That's why you bring shamans, and it doesn't matter how much healing a healer does if they bring damage. But like when you're actually talking about what healing, like what matters for healing, it's HPM and HPS, right? Your healing per mana spent and the healing per second you can put out. And no one can beat Priest in either of those metrics. In AoE healing, as long as you set up your groups properly, more relevant on Alliance where you're actually going to do that. Priests are going to be in groups of warriors, and Prayer of Healing can do insane, insane healing per second and healing per mana. It is an absolutely ludicrous healing ability in terms of how much you can put out. And as long as you're not overhealing and like 4 out of 5 of the people in your party took damage, it's really mana efficient too. Now, I mean, obviously, when you're talking about AoE healing, chain heal, if you're in like full tier 3 Nax, blah blah blah, it can get to like a 7 HPM ratio. But even still, prayer of healing can be 7 HPMing. Like if you're a priest and like full 8 out of 8 tier 2, a greater heal, like a rank 1 greater heal, is literally like 15 HPM. It's crazy. Like it's so insane because of that rank 5 renew you get on the end, and that scales your spell power and blah blah blah. So like anyway, priests, absolutely insane healers. They have crazy good HPM. They have every type of heal you could want. They have instant cast heals with shields and renews. They have a snipe heal with flash heal. They have a big meaty efficient heal with greater heal. They have AoE healing with prayer of healing. They are the best healers in the game. In a PvP setting, definitely the best PvP healers. I know some people are going to say again, oh, but shamans can global people in the same spec they're going to heal in, and like, oh, paladins, they have, well, whatever, right? The thing is, if you're in like a competitive PvP setting, there's two huge things you need out of a healer mostly, and that is, can it defensive dispel, can it offensive dispel, and can it instant cast heal? And priests are the only class in Classic WoW that can do all of those, right? They can purge off fears and polys on their allies. They can purge off important defensive debuffs and stuff on enemies. They can they can do out instant cast heals like shield and renew to keep people alive. The problem is like obviously like yeah, shamans can heal. The problem is they have to hard cast, right? And counterspell locks you out of casting spells for 10 seconds in vanilla WoW. So if you hard cast a spell and there's a mage anywhere near you, you're going to get kicked on that spell. You're not going to be able to cast anything in 10 seconds. Is plenty of time to kill somebody, right? When you're locked out of your healing spell school. So really, really good healers in PvP and PvE. In terms of their damage in a PvE setting, really bad. I mean, not that bad. They're basically like if you're playing a Smite Priest, you're playing it well, right gear, blah blah blah. You're basically going to be doing like Frost Mage damage. However, Frost Mage damage is not that good. Admittedly, you only go Frost Mage for the first couple phases because you can't go Fire. But honestly, even Fire Mage is not that good. Fire Mage doesn't do nearly as much damage as a Warrior does, even with Ignite. And like to be honest, like if Warriors could decurse, you wouldn't even bring mages. You bring mages for the decurse, not for their damage. And so it's like, well, like yeah, like we can put out damage equivalent to the worst spec of a class you wouldn't bring if it didn't have raid utility, right? Like so it's like yeah, it's not really that good in a competitive or like an optimal raid setting. You're never going to see any damage pre smite or shadow. And if you're going to say, oh, what if there's a bunch of warlocks? Like we need to boost their damage. You don't need to go shadow for shadow weaving. You can just go holy and then get the shadow weaving ability as an off spec and just cast rank 1 shadow or pains while you're healing. But I know that's kind of cringe, but that it's more optimal than playing shadow. Shadow sucks in a raid environment. It really the benefit of shadow is it provides a lot of healing to the party it's in, but even then it's not that big of a deal. In terms of PvP, though, in dueling and one-on-ones, Shadow, absolutely insane. It's a crazy good dueling spec. I would say it's probably not as good as some of the top ones, like, Sword or Dagger Rogues, whether you're playing, like, MPA or Cold Blood Abyss or whatever. Maybe not as good as those, but really up there in terms of its Shadow Priest is really up there in terms of its 1v1s. When anybody mentions, like, oh, like, top 5, like dueling specs in the game in Classic WoW, Shadow Priest, SL Lock, Frost Mage, Rogue, like it's up there, right? It's in the equation in every single video you're going to see. So really, really strong, shockingly durable for a clothy, good self healing, good mana efficient self healing with like Vampiric Embrace and the shield and everything, and decent damage, good dot, etc. Right? In terms of battleground, though, the problem is you're very mana inefficient in a battleground setting. So it's like, yeah, you could be a mid, kill somebody, blah, blah, blah. But then you have to sit down for like 30 seconds to drink. And by the time you're done drinking, they just rezzed at the graveyard and ran back to mid anyway. So it's like, it's not that good in a BG setting. Obviously, BG healing, crazy for Priest, but in a BG PvP damage setting, not that good overall, to be honest. All right, this is a leveling video. Let's get back to leveling. Obviously, it's kind of a meme. S tier stands for Star Shards tier. So if you actually wanted to, if you cared about race choice for leveling, which to be honest, I would not recommend choosing your race based on leveling speed. I would choose it for endgame reasons. I would say Nelf is it. Well, no, not even. I would say Nelf is clearly better than the rest of the races in terms of their leveling capabilities on Priest. I'll get into this more later when I get to the nerd math section of this. But Star Shards, a really, really, really mana efficient spell. It dramatically improves. Also snapshots your spell power. And when you're leveling as holy, which you should be in my opinion, it really impacts your ability to regenerate mana without having to drink mana efficiently while still taking advantage of your spell power. If you're not playing Nelf and you're worried about like leveling speed, it doesn't really matter. Trolls have Berserking. It's a nice little steroid. If you're playing hardcore, Dwarf has like DP and Fear Ward and Stone Form, all really good for like staying alive and staying safe. But to be honest, if you're choosing a race on his leveling speed, like you're going for some solo self-found 1 to 60 priest leveling world record, Star Shard's clearly the best choice. Nelf clearly the best choice. The only time Nelf's ever been good at anything in Vanilla WoW, to be honest. All right, endgame. Anybody who knows anything about Vanilla WoW is not going to be surprised by this. Dwarf, absolutely insane. Fear Ward is a crazy, crazy strong ability. In TBC, by the way, Fear Ward gets bumped up to like a 5 minute cooldown, and it's made baseline for every priest in the game because it's such an important ability. It's so good, so strong. The ability to give fear immunity and give fear immunity to other people is crazy. Stolen Form is also really relevant in both a raid and PvP setting. There's a lot of raid diseases and poisons that go out throughout all the expansions. Not Molten Core, but as you get into tier 3 and tier 2 and tier 2.5 and tier 3 like AQ and ZG and blah blah blah. Actually, a lot of those go out. Dust Repair is still relevant. And in PvP, Stone Form, super good. It can purge Blind, because Blind is a poison in Vanilla WoW. It can also purge off like Devouring Plague and can purge off Bleeds and blah, blah, blah. Like, it's actually a really relevant ability. Crippling Poison, whatever, right? And Death Repair is good and blah, blah. Like, so Dwarf, really, really good in everything it does. Definitely the best PvP and PvE race on Alliance. If you're not playing Dwarf on Alliance, it doesn't really matter. It's kind of trolling to not play Dwarf, but it's not the end of the world. You're probably still going to get a raid invite. But Dwarf Priest, absolutely massive on Alliance. If you're on Horde, in a PvE raid setting, Troll's probably better. Berserking, nice little HPS, DPS cooldown you have. If you're in a PvP setting, both the Horde races are actually really good for PvP. Will of the Forsaken is crazy. Obviously, only really relevant in fear matchups like Priest and Warrior and Warlock, especially in Priest and Warrior, because their fears are on cooldowns. But the thing is, there are other two abilities, not super good. Now, if you're playing Shadow and Devouring Plague, still good, still really good, provides a good amount of self healing. But Troll is just way better, in my opinion, if you're not getting that trinket off. Mostly because Troll, a lot of people are like, oh, like it's because Shadow Guard blocks Blackout. Like, yeah, it's good and all, but it's really Hex of Weakness. The fact that Troll has a MS effect when there's so few MS effects in Classic WoW is crazy. It's only 20%. It's not that good, but the ranged MS that you can apply as a priest is really good. It's really strong in like a BG PvP environment, which is what you're really going to be doing when you're playing competitive quote unquote PvP in Classic WoW. Shadow Guard, obviously, procs Blackout, still really good. Berserking, not that relevant in PvP, does something though. All right, let's get into some leveling builds. If you've ever leveled or you've seen any leveling guides in Classic WoW, you know everybody recommends going wands. I would still recommend you go wands 1 to 40. This is basically like the mind numbing type of turn off your brain spec. The reason why this spec is good is purely because pre 22 wands just outpace all the damage you're going to do on a priest. Basically, they just deal so much damage, especially if you're getting greater magical wand and lesser magical wand and your gravestone scepter and everything. Gravestone scepter, crazy good. You should try to get it always if you can. Even at 22, you're kind of trolling. It's when you get like a new rank of Smite that's actually pretty good. I think you're doing like 30, 40 DPS at that rank. Doesn't beat Gravestone Scepter, but it's like, you start to get comparable. But once you get past your 30s, like the Smite build starts to get better. But yeah, Discipline, highly recommend. If you're in a hardcore environment, definitely recommend going Discipline. It's really safe. You're basically going to be max mana, max health by the end of every single pull. The only problem, I guess you could say, if you even consider it a problem, is that it's like a very you literally unplug your brain. Like you're gonna walk up to a mob, Holy Fire, Shadow Word Pain, start your wand, and then alt tab to Netflix for 20 seconds. I'm not even joking. Like that, it's not fast, but it's safe, it's consistent, and you never have to drink, which is the real best part about it. If you don't want to do that and you wanted to start leveling a Smite earlier and you wanted to start getting you just want to change a pace because you're on your third priest or fourth priest like I am or something, you can go Smite. It's not nearly as bad as people think. Pre 22, you're trolling with it because the wands are just so strong, and the wands haven't fallen off yet. That you're just You just can't out DPS a wand at those levels. But it's still not like completely bad, and Smite is still relevant, if not the best. If you're playing Nelf, it's a little bit better because Nelf can start weaving in star shards early on and use that as like a mana regen spell. Um, and obviously, while you're leveling, you get better dungeon healing. It's not that bad. Post 30, probably better than Discipline. Maybe it's kind of close. Depends on the wand upgrades you get. You're probably still using. To be completely honest, you're probably going to continue using Gravestone Scepter all the way through to 40. So Smite really starts picking up in the 30s when you start doing like, oh, okay, no, I'm hitting for like 150, 200 damage a Smite now, and like it starts to be like a relevant ability at that point. And then you start like, okay, like yeah, like I have to spend mana to do damage, but I'm killing the mobs faster. There's some value there, etc. Right? Either way, 1 to 40, I'd recommend going Discipline. If you just feel like going Smite or you just want to change it up, change the pace. Maybe you want to respec at 30 because you're going to go Holy later and it's pretty good then. Maybe you go Holy then or Smite back then. I'll go over the build later though. More specifics. 40 plus, usually as a priest, you respec at 40 to whatever you go. I have 3 builds I'm calling out here. I know a lot of people will tell you like, oh, you should like at 40 respect Shadow, like be the spooky ghost. Shadow, like last time I made this video, I kind of like rode the line. I'm like, yeah, like it's good, still probably like more consistent, blah blah blah. I've gone back, I've crunched the math at a bunch of different levels. Like Shadow, it's mana efficient. It's not that much more mana efficient than Holy when you're properly geared, but it is mana efficient. It's pretty good. The problem is that it just doesn't deal as much damage as Holy. And so even if baseline it's a little more mana efficient, 10% more mana efficient roughly, you end up having to spend longer in combat, and whereas the Holy has already killed a mob. So like there's something to be said that even if, and by the way, Holy does actually match Shadow mana efficiency while Spirit Tap is active, which should be hopefully 50 to 75% of your mob kills are while Spirit Tap is active. But like Holy like can get up like just baseline against those levels, but it also just kills mobs faster. And just killing mobs faster is relevant, right? Like if you take too long, like I understand Mind Flight, really, really mana efficient ability, but it's just not the same as Holy. And there's also stuff where like you can get kicked back and you lose mana efficiency on that. Whatever. I'm not going to get into that. Either way, if you're not on a hardcore realm, though, I would actually not recommend you go either build, and I would recommend you go the specific AoE discipline build. I'm going to go over it later, right after this, and how to do the ZF solo. I'm not going to get into the full run, but basically, there's a specific build you need to go to solo ZF. I'll go over what that build is and why you need it. But yeah, if you're on like a normal realm or a PvP realm or whatever, and you wanted to level fast, highly recommend going the AoE build. If you're on hardcore, I would not recommend doing AoE. It is a very dangerous thing to do. You are one missed jump away from instantly deleting your character, or one disconnect or one bad lag spike. It's just a very, very dangerous run to do. You have literally 53 undead elites, and if you mess one thing up, you're dead instantly. Especially because you got to get so close to them. So yeah, if you're on hardcore, recommend going Holy. It's the best leveling spec in my opinion. If you're post 40 or you're not on hardcore, I recommend going the AoE build. Even if you spend literally like 4 or 6 hours wiping, you're still going to be level so much faster doing ZF solos once you get used to it. All right, let's get into the 1 to 40 builds. Some more details on them. Go over the talents, why they work. All right, for discipline, really the primary talents you need is Spirit Tap and Wand. Everything else, honestly, go whatever else you want. It really doesn't matter. You could go into the Holy Tree. You could go more down Shadow. You could go more into Discipline. Stereotypically, go into Discipline because it improves your mana efficiency once you get down to this third row. But really, it's not that big of a deal. What I would recommend, as soon as you finish up these 10 talents in Wand and Spirit Tap, for level 20 through 21 and whatever, 23 maybe, I would recommend getting 2 out of 2 Shadow or Pain, and then maybe two things in Hit. It doesn't impact that much. I wouldn't cast too many Mind Blasts, to be honest with you, unless you have the mana for it. But yeah, like so these it stops some resist, adds some damage. After that, just go down the disc tree. But really, you just need to get this wand and spirit tap. To explain, by the way, what I mean by synergistic talent here, if you don't know, the way people just know spirit tap is like, oh, it gives me my spirit regen while I'm in combat. The way spirit tap is worded is it says it doubles your spirit, which is what determines your mana regen, your base mana regen, I should say, not like you're drinking. It doubles your spirit and then gives you half of your spirit mana regen in combat, right? So the way that works is if you are at, let's say you're getting 100 mana per tick, right? Which is a lot, but let's just say you're getting 100 mana per tick. And you're in combat. Without Spirit Tap or Meditation, you're getting 0 mana, right? You're getting 0 mana per tick while you're casting spells. If you're not in combat, you're getting 100 mana per tick. With just Meditation, you're getting 15%, so that's 15 mana per tick. With just Spirit Tap, and while it's active, you're getting, double 50%, you're getting 100 mana per tick, while in combat, 200 out of combat. With both of these, you might be thinking, well, what do you get, right? Well, it's 15%, 50%. Oh, maybe it's the biggest number wins, so I'm only getting 100. Say, oh, well, maybe they add together. Maybe it's 115. It's actually 130 because the way it works is that, again, Spirit Tap doubles your spirit. So when you're getting that 15% mana regen, you're not just getting 15% of your base, you're also getting 15% of the double spirit you just got from Spirit Tap. So if you're getting 100 mana per tick previously with Spirit Tap, you're going to get 130 mana per tick in combat with Meditation. It's actually not that relevant because you don't have nearly as much in combat time as you might think. Because while you're wanding, you're not casting spells, that technically counts as out of combat time for how your mana regen is calculated, because it's just 5 seconds since the last time you cast a spell. So it's not that good, but it is something. And so it does synergize. All right, Smite. This again, pre-22, literally trolling by going. It's just worse than the wand build. Post 22 to 30, whatever, when you start getting your next ranks of Holy Fire and Smite, it's like it's comparable, but like in terms of damage. But obviously, you're spending mana to do it, and that's like just less efficient than not spending mana, right? So it's still fine. And honestly, if you're aggressively pursuing Spirit, you have more than enough Spirit regen to keep up all the spells you're casting, which you should be doing even in the 20s. I'll get more into gearing later, but basically the point of this build is that I guess basically you just don't have to respec when you want to go the holy build post 40, and you get to start getting used to doing it and like learning your like, you see I have like this like rotation or this kind of thing. In reality, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be kind of alternating between doing a bunch of smites to kill mobs faster, and then some, one Holy Fire, Shadow or Pain, and then start wanting to regen mana while your Spirit Tap's active. If you're Nelf, you're going to do a specific, like, you're going to cast Star Shards to regen mana. But I'll get into that later when I talk about the nerd math. So this is just an alternative way you could go 1 to 40. It's not as good. It's not like completely trolling. And honestly, once you're in your 30s, it probably is better than the wand spec. But, you got to be in your 30s. And then, you might as well just wait until you're 39 so you can respect the holy if you're just doing the disc. All right. AoE. This is a specific build you need to go. You need to go these talents very specifically to do this build or to do this run effectively. I have talents you should get, but the absolutely critical talents you need to get are Holy Nova, Holy Reach, and Inner Focus. If you want to run the AoE build, you need those 3 talents. You technically don't need Inner Focus, but for those of you who don't know, there's a mechanic in Classic WoW that's kind of niche. You only really know if you do AoE grinding. And that is if you go 45 seconds without damaging a mob, so you just hop back and forth, regenning mana with your passive regen, it will lose mana equal to its health it's lost, right? So if a mob is at 10% health, right, and it was normally worth 200 XP, right, and you jump back and forth for 45 seconds not damaging that mob, and it goes 45 seconds without taking damage, it will drop down to 20 XP, right? So there's going to be times that you're doing these runs and you kill a mob and you're going to be like, wait a minute, why did I get 5 XP on that mob? It's because you did not leash that XP properly, right? So you cannot dilly-dally. Every time you need to be constantly damaging the mobs. And inner focus is great for that because the way mana regen works in Classic WoW, it is not when you're in combat. It is 5 seconds after you cast a spell. But what it really is 5 seconds after you've last spent mana. Inner focus gives you a free cast. So what that means is that you can run over, damage all the mobs with an inner focus Holy Nova, and it won't reset your spirit-based mana regeneration. So you're going to continue regenerating mana. You still leash the mobs like you needed to, but you basically never stop regenerating mana, so you end up getting a ton of mana back. It's basically like a free mana pot on a 3-minute cooldown. So Holy Nova, really important for the build in terms of your mana efficiency because it's going to dramatically improve your kill times. I am not going to get into how to do the build here. I will link the videos I have made on how to do these polls in the description. I'm sure by the time you're watching this, other people have made videos too on how to do this. So feel free to watch them or however else you want to figure out how to do it. It is a hard run. It's like literally both those videos I've made are like 20, 30 minutes. It's a lot to go over. It's specific to priests. So watch guides, learn how to do it, go this build. If you're not in a hardcore realm, always do this. Even if you spend 5 hours wiping, it's still going to be efficient. If you're leveling, by the way, just to give you some numbers here in case you don't believe me. If you're just questing out in the open world at like 42, if you're being efficient, most people probably getting 35, 45 XP per hour completely real, right? Like, yeah, like, oh, but I told you like a big quest turn and blah, blah. If you actually average out like your 7-hour playtime on that session you just had, you're probably not getting much more than like 35, 40K an hour. When you're doing ZFA league riding, you're getting like 130 XP, 130K XP per hour. It is absolutely insane. You're literally leveling like 3 to 4 times faster than if you're requesting. Absolutely huge. So, and you can do this, by the way, 40 to 54. I have a build here that goes to 60 because if you didn't know, these 3 talents are also pickups you would get for the Smite build. So, or a Smite Discipline healing build. So, what I recommend is that after you do this, just take this spec and build it into your max level Discipline Smite Priest builds. If you don't know, the build you run for Smite Priest is virtually identical to the build you'd run for Discipline Holy or Discipline Healing. So, this is an optimal Discipline Healing build, with the exception of you didn't get Inspiration. You can pull 2 points out of Renew to get that, whatever, right? But you just get 2 in the 10% smite damage spec to get the damage there. And this is now your optimal hybrid discipline and smite spec, which is convenient for both grinding out in the open world and healing raids later at night without trolling. All right, but if you're on hardcore or if you don't feel like doing this, my opinion, you should really be going holy. I'll go more into the math here later because I think a lot of people just don't believe me. And I know in my last video, a lot of people had questions like, oh, like blah, 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 like this, that, and the other about this build. Holy really is better. Now, this is predicated. The reason why this is good is because it is predicated on you gearing your priest properly. Okay. You need to prioritize spirit. It is spirit, 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 then more spirit and more spirit. And once you're done with that, finally, okay, you have some of the owl pieces that have some int on them. But really, you want as much spirit as you can get your grubby little hands on. And when you're leveling your priest, you should be aggressively pursuing spirit on every single piece of items you can get. If you've been doing this, literally, by the way, you can just go to the auction house and buy spirit greens, like of spirit, like bracers of spirit, but belt of spirit kind of thing, or of the owl if you want to get some int in there, or of the bear, of the whale that has spirit and stam. Of I think it's of the whale, but either way, it doesn't really matter, right? Like you just want every single piece should have as much spirit as you can possibly get on it, and that means you should be trying to run dungeons to get the SM Cath, like helm and neck. Like you should be trying to get the Sivanad robes from Nomergon. Like you should be trying to get the there's like those really good robes from like ST and blah, blah, whatever, right? Like while you're leveling, really prioritize getting spirit. And it's because if you've been doing that, and the breakpoint I always give is 200 by 40, 250 by 45, and you can hit 300 by 50. However, honestly, by the time you hit 50, this is if you're soloing, not doing AoE, by the way. You don't really need 300. Like by that point, you're going to start maybe considering your Pre-Bis and stuff like that. But If you're aggressively pursuing spirit and you're getting as much spirit as you possibly can at every point, you can absolutely easily get 220 to 240 without even having divine spirit on you. Now, the reason why this is good, and I know I stressed that for a lot, but the reason why this is good is this talent right here. This is why holy leveling is so efficient. This is spiritual guidance. Now, for those of you who don't know what this talent does, this talent gives you 25% of your spirit as healing and spell power, spell damage, spell damage and healing power. What that means, so if you have 200 spirit, which is what I tell you should have at 40, you can easily get 220. I dinged 40 with like 230, I think, by the way. You can have 200 spirit at level 40. That is 50 spell power. That in and of itself is already pretty good, by the way. But this synergizes with Spirit Tap. Again, you remember what I mentioned earlier. Spirit Tap doesn't just give you mana regen. It doubles your spirit and then gives you 50% of your mana regen in combat. What that means is while you have Spirit Tap active, you are actually, if you're at 200 spirit, you're actually at 400 spirit. You're getting 100 spell power out of spiritual guidance. So what you're going to do, you stack as much spirit as you can get your hands on. You're going to have like 100 spell power, which by the way is like more than you get on like raid weapons as a caster. And that 100 spirit, or that 100 spell damage is actually really relevant for your damage output when you're leveling Holy, because the Holy spells scale really well in Classic WoW. Shadow doesn't. Shadow, the two main Shadow spells, Mind Blast and Mind Flay, scale at a 45 or 41% for Mind Blast and 45% for Mind Flay. It is some of the worst scaling spells in the game. Holy, by comparison, Holy Fire, 100% spell power ratio. Smite, 71% spell power ratio. If you do Cast the Pain, by the way, Shadow Word Pain, that's 100%, but spread out over 18 seconds, so it's kind of bad. Star Shards, by the way, 100%. So, like, all the spells you're casting is Holy, especially if you're Nelf, 100% spell power ratio. And by the way, if you're leveling Nelf and leveling Holy, Star Shard snapshots its spell damage at the beginning of the cast, and it's a 6-second cast. So, literally, if you're like 4 seconds before the end of your Spirit Tap, you can run up to a mob, Holy Fire, Shadow Word Pain, and Star Shards, and all of it's getting max Spirit Tap benefit, which means you're getting an extra like 300 damage. I have the math later in the slides. You're going to see what the math is and why I'm telling you all this to prove it. But what this comes out to, you might do all your spells and you do like 1400 with base damage, but you might get an extra 400 damage or more out of that spell damage. Just do the math. It's literally like a 30% damage increase over your spells. Not to mention like the 10% damage increase you're getting here, the crit you're getting. I mean, the cast time doesn't help you that much. And if you wanted to go heal a dungeon, you're in your healer spec. You're literally in your raid healing spec while you're in a dungeon. I mean, everyone's gonna love you like when you're healing these dungeons pre 60, right? So Holy really is an amazing spec for leveling. Now, I will say I'm going to go into Shadow. Shadow is not trolling, by the way. You can absolutely go Shadow. There's some things Shadow is better at, but I would say consistently, if you're pulling it well, and by the way, what you need to be doing is you want to optimize your Spirit Tap usage. So when you kill a mob, you want to, within 15 seconds or within 10 seconds, be already casting a spell on another mob so that you can get at least 2 to 3 spell casts off with Spirit Tap. And even in late 40s, when you have all this spirit, you're going to have literally like, you're going to be able to go at least 4 or 5 mobs without having to drink as a Holy Priest. As long as the mobs aren't over leveled. Now, there is something Holy struggles with. If the mobs are really over leveled, you don't get the hit talents that Shadow does. But anyway, by and large, the spell power is super critical. And if you're just mob grinding, like in mob dense spots, which is what you should be doing, hopefully, it is really, really, really good for your leveling efficiency. And that spell damage matters the same amount as like literally darkness and shadow form combined. It does so much. All right, let's get into Shadow. Shadow, not bad, by the way. It's obviously everyone recommended it all for many years for a reason. It's still a good leveling build. It's still mana efficient. I'll get into the math later. Baseline, Shadow is a very mana efficient build, even if you have shit gear, right? And that's sort of the benefit of Shadow. If you were not prioritizing your spirit gear, which you should have been doing if you were Holy, It's not as critical for Shadow, but you still want to prioritize it for the mana efficiency. Shadow is still going to have a pretty good DPM, like damage per mana spent ratio, right? Uh, the other benefit or Shadow has, if you're doing PvP while you're leveling, because you're on like a PvP server and you want to duel people, uh, really, really good for that. You are like the PvP spec. You're obviously insane in duels. Everyone always knows that about Shadow Priest. Um, and also if you want to do like for whatever reason you want to do like higher level mobs or like challenging content, like I don't know why you would, but like if you want to take on mobs that are like 4 levels higher than you, the 10% hit talent you get here is absolutely critical for that. So it's good there. Just the fact that you have your silence, you have like a reduced cooldown on your psychic scream, you have like vampiric embrace, you have a lot more tools to play with. Also, probably the biggest thing about Shadow, you're absolutely dripped out. You look sick as a Shadow Priest. Spooky ghost, your mount is purple and spooky. So there's some value there. Not gonna lie, I also like looking cool. But yeah, it's mainly for like the other stuff. Like Shadow is cool for the other stuff. Like you have like reduced damage taken on Shadow form. Like you have your utility. Like you have uh the slow from Mind Flay and the hit talent and whatever, right? Like there's a lot of things you can do to be more mana efficient. Now you don't do your damage as fast as Holy would, but it's still pretty good. And honestly, if you just want to say I want to be a Shadow Priest because I'm absolutely dripped out, just know that like honestly, it's pretty close. Worst case scenario, 10% less efficient than a Holy Priest. Like worst case scenario, the builds are really close to each other. All right, let's get into some nerd math. Now, if you remember the first time I did this, I had a lot more math on this slide. I realized I don't need to go over this. You can go back to that first video if you want to see the slides I put together there with the calculations. I did those calculations at 42, and a lot of people got on my case because they were saying, oh, 42 is like a great rank for Holy. That's why Holy looks so good. Because Holy at 42, it got its new rank of Smite and Holy, but like the next rank of Mind Flay at 44 is what makes all the difference. And 46, you get the next rank of Mind Blast. Like clearly, once you get to 46, it's just way better for Shadow or whatever, right? Anyway, so I went ahead and did the calculations at 46 for this video. This is biased towards Shadow, right? This is one of the better levels you're going to get at Shadow. If you did this at 50 something, it is way better for Holy because Holy scales way better with your gear and you deal way more damage per second. Like Mind Flay does not pick up that much compared to Smite. Smite does a lot more damage. Anyway, so this is assuming this is what your mana efficiency is. If you are at 250 spirit, that's what the 250 means at 46. Again, I was 230 at 40 to 42 just with auction house greens and like 4 dungeon drops. All right. This, again, 250, it's a hard number to reach, but you absolutely can reach it if you're gearing properly. And that means every piece of gear you have on is relevant within like the last 10 levels. You got some dungeon gear, etc. Right? Like this is an achievable number. Obviously, like undead get a little bit more spirit base, you get 5 more spirit there. If you're a human, you have no excuse. You should be 250 if you're a human with the extra 10% mana. But this is while Spirit Tap active. If Spirit Tap is not active, this is like 2 DPM. The DPM is damage per mana spent. So it's 10% less efficient than Shadow. But I want you to know something. Even with that 10% less damage efficiency, right? What you need to notice, by the way, is that this Shadow I just linked here is with 2 casts of Mind Flay and 1 cast of Shadow Word Pain. This is a low DPS ability, and this is the full duration of Shadow Word Pain. This is 18 seconds. You did all of this damage as Holy with 3 seconds, 2, right? So like what is that? Like 9 seconds? In 9 seconds, you did 1900 damage as a Holy Priest. In what is this? Roughly the same amount of damage in 18 seconds. Now you had some wands you could have thrown in there, right? But again, wands fall off a cliff in your 40s, so it's not that much better, right? But you just deal way more damage way faster as a Holy Priest. Like you kill mobs easily 4 to 6 seconds faster. So even if you're 10% less efficient, guess what? You've been casting spells this whole time as a Shadow. Maybe you started wanding, but you're still killing the mob slower. Even if we just ignored the fact that killing mobs slower means that you're killing fewer mobs per minute, if you killed a mob 4 to 6 seconds sooner as a Holy Priest, that means you're regenerating mana 4 to 6 seconds sooner as a Holy Priest, right? Now, you could say, well, okay, I'm just going to only Mind Flay. Like, I'm not going to Shadow Word Pain, blah, blah, blah. There's also problems with that because by the time you get through 1, maybe 2 Shadow Word Pains, the mob is on top of you and probably broke your shield. And once you break your shield, it's going to kick back your Mind Flay, and the mana efficiency tanks, right? When you take a single hit, the mana efficiency on Mind Flay goes straight into the gutter. It's right. It's really bad because you're probably missing that second tick, maybe even the first 2 ticks entirely. You might only get 1 tick off of Mind Flay if you take too much damage, right? So, like, whereas that's not a problem with Smite because you only cast it when you get a full cast off, right? So you don't have to worry about respend it ahead of time. Again, I'm also going to mention Star Shards. You can see it here. Star Shards absolutely goated for the mana efficiency. The craziest thing about this, though, is actually something not pictured in this DPM graph here, or in this calculation. By the way, I'm not going to get into how this calculations go. I will link this Stay Safe video in the description along with the slides. You can look up how these numbers are actually calculated. These are accurate values for the average damage you get for each of these spells. But the craziest thing here is the way mana regen works in Classic WoW. In combat mana regen for a caster, for when you cast spells, is not when you're in combat, is 5 seconds after you last spent mana, right? But the way this works is that when you start channeling Holy Fire, your global cooldown ticks instantly. So by the time you're done with this, your global cooldown is over, but you don't spend mana until the end of this cast. And Shadow Word Pain is an instant cast, so it happens immediately. So what that means is that you cast this and this at the exact same time. You Q Shadow Word Pain, they go off the exact same instant. You have 1 global, then you cast Star Shards, which immediately spends all its mana, right? And then it's done. So in reality, your in-combat casting time was 1.5 seconds with this combo. It is 1 global, 1 singular global is the only time you are casting mana as a Nelf Priest with Star Shards for being mana efficient. And by Star Shards is such a long cast, by the way, it's 6 seconds. By the time you finish this, you are already regenning mana fully. So when you kill that mob at the end of this cast, you are going to be able to immediately start regenning your mana at full Spirit Tap 200% ratio. Your mana efficiency as a Nelf Priest is literally better than this 2.53 number is even showing you here. It is probably closer to 3 DPM because of the extra mana ticks you're getting at 200% mana regen before you start your next one, where everyone else is going through at least 2 to 3 ticks of the reduced mana regen rate at 130% with meditation, 100% because you probably don't have meditation. But yeah, so yeah, I just want to show this here. This, again, this is with 250. You could be down to 220, 230, knock off 5% here, 0.5, so it's like 215 or 212 or something. And then, obviously, if you're out of combat, it goes down a little bit. So, yeah, you might be down 0.2, 0.3 DPM on a Shadow Priest. But again, you're killing the mobs 4 to 6 seconds sooner at least. So, like, there's something to be said there. And if you kill 3 mobs in a row 4 to 6 seconds faster, you have 12 seconds to drink. That more than makes up for the mana efficiency you lost. So, Holy Nova or Holy Build if you're leveling. And again, I'm going to point this out, 46, a biased Shadow level. As you get higher ranks of Holy, it would get even better. But yeah, so again, Holy, my opinion, I don't see any reason why not. It is a better leveling build in terms of just your ability to efficiently mob grind and put out damage and conveniently heal in the same spec. All right, now, I mentioned very early on in this video that I believe personally 54/55 is when you're done leveling, right? Why do I say that? Well, it's because once you hit 60, what do you need to do? Well, you need to get your attunements done. You need to go farm your Pre-Bis. You need to blah, 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 right? But guess what? You know what you're going to do at that level? You're going to go back to the same dungeons you could have run at 54, 55 as a priest and grind them for 10 hours. You could have just grinded them while you were leveling. You don't need to be 60 as a healer to run max level dungeons. The reason you can't be a 60 DPS is because spells against higher level mobs have, increased chance to resist. If you're a melee, you're going to get affected by glancing blows. You're going to miss all your attacks. Like, you do significantly less damage. You're going to be doing like 30 damage to a mob 5 levels higher than you. That doesn't matter for heals. Like, if you heal somebody, an ally who's 5 levels higher than you, it's not like it has a chance to resist. It's not like it's going to have a partial resist or a partial heal. The only thing a heal can do is hit or crit. That's it. That's all the thing. It has a 100% hit ratio too, right? So there's no reason you shouldn't be farming your Pre-Bis as a healer specifically pre-60. And you can even do some of your Pre-Bis as a DPS pre-55 because you're going to be doing BRD Golem runs and Emp runs and blah, blah, blah. Strat UD and Ubers, yeah, some of the mobs are like 62, so you need to be higher level for that if you're going to be a DPS. But still, again, do these things as a healer. You can do them early. Just heal these runs. You can ding 60. All your Pre-Bis already completed if you just started at 54, including your attunes, by the way. The attunements take a while. The Anixia attunement in general, and specifically, takes a very long time to do. So, there's some reasons you can, you should be getting your Pre-Bis, and then, so at that point, like, even if it's less efficient to do it that way, you can always go back to questing if you need to, but it's better to just always, get your Pre-Bis, get all your Pre-Bis done, and only stop doing your Pre-Bis if you somehow got all your BRD shit done, like, before you were, like, 57, just go quest, I guess, until you're 57, and then go run Strat UD and everything like that. Get your little teal dress that everybody loves. I mean, you can do them earlier on. You can do Strat UD at 55, but just make sure you invite a mage because it's going to be kind of a hard run. And then also, benefit to doing this is that you're not doing quests, and I bet you and I also don't know what the TBC pre-quest list is anyway, so you don't want to do those quests in the off chance that you might need those for the TBC pre-quest list, because that does actually end up mattering a lot on expansion launch. All right. Last slide. Gearing and wand progression. So, again, I mentioned this, by far the biggest thing you need to do, especially post 40, get your spirit gear. If you're going to level holy, get your spirit gear. It's so critical. Not only is it how you're going to be mana efficient so you don't have to drink, which, by the way, if you've been mana efficient pre-20, I leveled a Smite from, I want to say, like, level like 15 all the way to 40. And I did not drink a single time from 15 until like 36. I literally was vendoring my water. You do not have to drink as a priest if you've been gearing your spirit properly. Outside of that, especially if you're leveling discipline, you need to prioritize your wands. The wands are so critical because it's going to be such a huge portion of your damage. Again, you don't need to worry about wands post 40 because they fall off a cliff, literally. Like a level 51 is like doing like 50 DPS, right? A level 20 wand is doing like 20 something DPS. But guess what? Your spells in that time went from 30 DPS to like 300 DPS. So it's like absolutely insane the level of, like, they don't scale. Like, wands just don't scale very well compared to spells, which do a lot more damage a lot faster, right? So really, these are the 3 wands you need. Get Lesser Magic Wand by level 8. You can craft it. By the way, I mentioned this last video. I'll mention again. If you're self-found, it's 60 linen to craft a Lesser Magic Wand if you go tailoring and enchanting. And it's another 120 linen past that, or 180 linen for both. If you want to get the levels to get Greater Magic Wand and the materials to make a Greater Magic Wand. After that, Gravestone Scepter is the next best one. Really, really, really important wand. There's just no comparable wand for the amount of damage it does at the level you can get it. You can easily get this by 25 to 26 as a healer. But if you don't get this, get Lesser Mystic Wand. It's almost as good. It has 5 less DPS. It's not a Shadow wand, so if you're on Shadow, it's not as good. If you don't know, Shadow, Form, and Darkness improve your Shadow wand damage as well. But yeah, after that, if you're at 40s and you're going Shadow, get the Blackbone Wand. It's a nice Shadow wand, but you should really be casting more spells than that. But here's my sort of breakpoints. By 50, honestly, but if I always level as, I'm going to be leveling as Disc by 50 because I'm probably going to be doing whatever, the AoE grind, but, 280 at least. 200 by 40 is like the real number I'm always shooting for. And I always try to have 100 spirit in my 20s. Again, that's just going to the auction house and buying any number of greens or just having tailoring. After you're 50, care less about your spirit. Once you start doing pre-grinding, and start getting all the plus gear you can possibly get your hands on, because that's what you need for 60. And I have a video on Pre-Bis and how I go about getting it and what items you need to target. So feel free to go watch that video if you want to see what I do 54 plus. But yeah, that was the video. I hope you guys liked it. This is hopefully, I think, the last priest leveling guide I'm going to make. I think this is about as comprehensive as I or anyone's ever going to get on a priest leveling guide. So I hope you guys liked it. And yeah, have fun leveling your priest.